Part 120. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1192. Lily has spiritual power in her body and is protected by the Tao Te Ching. This yin qi has no impact on her at all, so her expression remains unchanged, except for the fact that her hair is swaying uncontrollably in the wind. On the contrary, she was the quietest one among the crowd. Many people only stood at the door for a while before they started stamping their feet. Apparently their feet became stiff. People from the association were still shouting, "It's getting late. Everyone, go back early and come back early. We will wait outside." This time the leader was an old man surnamed Chuang. He looked to be in his 60s. His body was as straight as a javelin, his face was fair, his hair was already graying, he had a beard, and his eyes were bright and clear when he walked. Taking the wind, you should have practiced it a few times. Lily felt that he had a little spiritual power. Although it was not very powerful, compared with others, he was already very good. No wonder the people of the association asked him to take the lead. After listening to the words of the person in charge of the association, the old man surnamed Zhuang took the lead and stepped into the ancient house. He heard a creak sound. He didn't know what he stepped on and made a loud sound. Everyone was startled. He glanced at it and said, "Please be careful, it's very humid here. Be careful that the road is slippery and difficult to walk on. The ancient house has been eroded by yin qi all year round and is covered with weeds. The ground is covered with moss. The ground under the moss is very soft and moist." When the old man named Zhuang Tianming stepped on it, the calm moss on the surface suddenly cracked. When it opened, some brown muddy water splashed out. When everyone saw that nothing happened, they all knew that they were nervous. They couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and entered the ancient house one after another. Lily was among the crowd and walked at the end. Zhuang Tianming had some skills. Lily could tell that this man was used to seeing others, had experienced a lot of things, and had a mature and steady personality. In addition, he seems to have some spiritual power lingering around him. It seems that even if he is not a master, he is indeed somewhat capable among this group of people, so he can take the lead. Lily walked behind and cut off her head. There were more than 100 people in the group, including the photographer, and they all carried tools. They cleared a path as they walked and threw the cut weeds aside. The house covers a large area, including gardens, rock eyries, pools, and pavilions. Now that everyone has just entered the house, they probably have to walk through the entire house. With so many people, walking is slow. In addition, no one lives here for a long time, it is overgrown with weeds, and it needs to be cleaned up as you go. It is not an easy task to visit the house. I am afraid it will take a whole day. When the man carrying the camera saw Lily at the end, he couldn't help but glance at her. This time, Lily was not the only young girl who entered the ancient house together. But she is definitely one of the most beautiful girls, extremely eye-catching. You walk behind. Seeing the beautiful girl, the man carrying the camera couldn't help but want to strike up a conversation. He was about to say that Lily might as well walk behind. With everyone walking in front, there will be less danger behind her, but before he finished speaking, someone suddenly screamed in front of him, "Ah!" It was very quiet in this ancient house, so quiet that it was almost eerie, and the scream was a little trembling. It broke the tranquility of the entire ancient house. This added a sense of eeriness and horror for no reason, and the crowd couldn't help but panic. Someone then shouted, "What is that?" A hissing sound was heard, and people screamed and jumped one after another. Fear is the most easily contagious thing, and people on both sides of it don't even know what it is. The huge crowd suddenly became panicked. When there are too many people in a panic, chaos naturally arises. When chaos begins, it is easy to push and push. Some people subconsciously run back, while others instinctively want to move forward to see what is going on. A middle-aged woman ran after everyone like a headless fly, but she didn't know what was going on. She wanted to look forward, but the people in front of her were running back again. Under such a collision, the middle-aged woman suddenly the child was knocked to the ground and sat down with a puff sound. The muddy water splashed out, soaking all her robes and pants. She put her hands on the ground and suddenly let out a cry of ouch, I seem to have been bitten by something. She raised her hand, and there was a hole about the size of a grain of rice in the palm of her hand that was stained with green moss and muddy water. Blood was flowing out from the inside, mixed with sewage and dripping down her palm. Everyone scrambled to help her get up, but her body was already soaked and she was shivering from the cold. What should I do? Do you have any extra pants to change into? Once he saw someone injured, the person who helped her asked involuntarily. The woman shook her head and had agreed in advance that she would only stay for a day at most this time. It's not possible to take a bath and change clothes in this place. We are not children anymore, and we have never thought that we would fall and have to change pants. The bags we carry are either medicine or food, and there are very few people with clothes. The Taoist robe is wet, and it's a little cold in here. Take it off first to avoid catching a cold. Zhuang Tianming, who was in front of him, stepped back and saw the woman's bleeding palms. He frowned and said, first disinfect your hands with alcohol, and then apply the medicine on them. Do you need to go to the hospital? The woman shook her head and rubbed her hands nonchalantly twice. It's not a big deal. It seems to me that there were some fragments scratched on the ground. It's probably that the fragments got into the flesh. Use alcohol. Just disinfect your hands first and then pick out the things. She always felt as if something had penetrated into her flesh and blood just now, and the foreign body feeling was uncomfortable even thinking about it now. But if she goes out now, once the filming is completed, she may not be able to get much money because she gave up halfway. As soon as the woman said this, Zhuang Tianming nodded. Seeing that the woman took off the bag she was carrying, took out alcohol from it and sprayed it on her wound, he lowered his voice and asked with some annoyance. What just happened? As soon as they entered the ancient house, these people started to cause trouble and pushed people down. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. Otherwise, if there was a stampede, once someone died, it would not matter if the people of the association could not escape. Well, I'm afraid the Chu family will also fall out. Ah! After hearing Zhuang Tianming's question, someone suddenly reacted. There seemed to be a snake just now, and it flew up all of a sudden. It was scary. It was autumn at this time, and the place was humid. It was normal to see snakes, but some people made a fuss and even made people fall down. Zhuang Tianming's face looked a little ugly, and he was about to speak, when he heard a hiss sound, and suddenly a gray-brown, chopstick-like shadow quickly emerged from the grass half a man tall, and rushed towards the door in front of Zhuang Tianming. Things happened so suddenly. No matter how calm Zhuang Tianming was, he was shocked by this turn of events. It was already too late to dodge. He was so shocked that he was about to retreat when a thin white hand suddenly stretched out. With a snap, she pinched the slender shadow in her palm. With a soft sound of porphyry, her beautiful fingers exerted a little force, and the thin snake that had been caught by her 7 inches was suddenly she crushed her head, leaving only a bloody wound on the snake's body. Blood dripped down the palm of her hand. The snake's tail was still swaying instinctively, but after only 2 or 3 blows, it gradually stopped moving. The sudden change shocked everyone, and Zhuang Tianming's back was wet with cold sweat. When he came to his senses, the snake had been killed. He turned around in shock and saw that one of the group, Lily, who originally came from Yong'an County, was throwing the headless dead snake body into the grass without changing her expression. There were still residual blood stains and traces of blood on her palms. Minced meat, many people started to retching involuntarily when they saw this scene. Lily calmly raised her dirty hand, turned the other hand over, took off the bag on her back, took out a bottle of mineral water from it, handed it to Zhuang Tianming and then calmed down. Said, "Can you unscrew it for me?" Only then did Zhuang Tianming react. He swallowed, and the gray stubble on his chin trembled because of his movements. He nodded, took the mineral water, unscrewed it hard, and poured the water out upside down. Lily took the handle. Zhuang Tianming went over to wash it off, thanked him, and poured on the mineral water again. Everyone who entered the house this time only brought 5 bottles of mineral water. They didn't know how long it would take to walk through this place, and they couldn't drive in to deliver things, so as not to damage the ancient house and make the Chu family angry. Therefore, water, food and medicine are important things and should be used sparingly. Lily took out a tissue from her bag and wiped her hands. She saw that the injured woman was still standing in her wet Taoist robe. Because it was too cold here, no one was willing to take off her Taoist robe. Lily just felt that the robe was too long. The long tail was in the way, so he took off his Taoist robe and handed it to the woman. The woman didn't expect that she would do this. She was a little surprised at the moment, but also a little grateful. "Thank you." She didn't have a change of trousers, so as soon as she took off her robe, she tore off the dry part of the robe and put it inside her own trousers, and put the robe on the outside, which was much better. But when the woman stretched out her hand, Lily saw at a glance her hand that was said to have been cut by something. The hand was glowing with an abnormal gray color. Lily frowned and reached out to grab her wrist. "You was bitten by something." For some reason, when her hand touched her, the woman's body trembled obviously, as if she had been burned by something. She instinctively shook Lily's hand away. "It's nothing." Lily's fingers were delicate and warm, but from the woman's perspective, her hands seemed to be able to eat people, which made her palms burn a little painfully. It must have been cut by something. "I'll just find a place to stop temporarily and I'll find a way to pick out the things inside." Ideal 4. "I must go to bed early tomorrow. I can't stand it anymore." Everyone voted for me. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1193. Lily was about to speak, but the woman had already retreated into the crowd. Zhuang Tianming shouted, okay, since everything is fine, everyone should leave first. The task is urgent now. It has been delayed for such a long time. We have just entered ancient house, at least we have to get here today." He pointed at a photo, which was a rough view of the ancient house below taken from the sky during aerial photography. This is also everyone's map. The direction of Zhuang Tianming's finger is exactly in the center, which means it is the direction of the main house. Lily frowned. Everyone had just experienced what happened before, and they were still frightened. Shen Chun didn't know when he got there. Next to Lily, someone looked at her up and down several times as if she was a little surprised. "Okay, Lily Song, when did I not know that you were so capable? You could catch a snake with your bare hands and crush it to death. I really underestimated you." He was wearing that ridiculous Taoist robe. He shook his head and said, "It can't be fake, right? You're so lucky." With Shen Chun's appearance, Lily's eyes turned cold. She packed her backpack and quickly followed the others. The further we walked into the yard, the colder we became. The sun was no longer visible in the air, and the surrounding area seemed to be covered with a layer of blue mist, making it look gray. I don't know if it was because of the snake before, but everyone was startled. No one spoke any more along the way. They could only hear the sound of squeaking when everyone's feet stepped on the ground, and muddy water splashed out. She's voice was extremely loud and harsh in such a silent atmosphere. An inexplicable tension and solemnity enveloped everyone's hearts. After passing the front yard, the real main entrance was ahead. This road is not particularly long, but for some unknown reason, everyone walked for nearly 20 minutes. Inside is a vermilion red door opposite, because of its long history. The red paint on the door is no longer as bright as it used to be. Instead, it shows a lifeless black and red color, just like the appearance of the blood after it has dried, which is a bit eerie. There are 2 stone lions on both sides of the stone gate. But I don't know what happened. The 2 stone lions were already mutilated. Half of the head of one stone lion was missing, as if it had been chopped off by someone. The other stone lion even had its entire head missing. The head next to it was missing. There was a half circle buried on the ground. Someone kicked it and said, "It's hard, it's stone. It should be the head of the stone lion." Although it is now beyond recognition, half of it is buried deep in the soil. There is a plaque hanging above the gate. The paint has peeled off, and it is covered with green creeping plants. You can only vaguely see the word garden written in small seal script on the far left, and the other words are in time. Under the devastation, he could no longer see clearly. And this must have been the previous name of this ancient house. This garden was originally the residence of the 5th grade Tongzi, who retired and returned to his hometown. It was naturally built in an extremely magnificent manner. After so many years, even though the wooden frame next to it has been modeled, one can vaguely imagine that this garden was newly repaired. The appearance of time comes. The door frame next to it had long been rotten. Someone reached out to touch it and touched a handful of wood residue. There were dense insect holes in the middle of the wood. The man clapped his hands and said, "What should I do?" There was a lock on the door. It must have been locked by the warlord named Yuan. It's been so many years. There is definitely no key. If you want to get in, you have to break the lock. But these things are all labeled as cultural relics, so I am afraid that the lock will be damaged. The door frame will break at a touch, and if you knock on the door and lock it, the door will be damaged. A group of people might not be able to eat anything and walked away. No one dares to be the first person to come forward and volunteer to break the lock. After all, everyone is seeking wealth, not disaster. Everyone gathered in front of the door. Mosquitoes were buzzing outside. This place was cold and humid, and there were so many mosquitoes. Even after spraying mosquito repellent, some people still got bitten by mosquitoes after standing for a while. The bites from the wild mosquitoes in the house were very painful, followed by excruciating itching, and the scratches were stained with blood. After staying there for a while, those who were bitten by 2 more bites became terribly itchy, and they kept urging, "Are you okay?" While speaking, there was also the sound of slapping mosquitoes on the flesh, and the sound of pop-up sounded from time to time. Zhuang Tianming was the leader of this mission. He was a little unsure and hesitantly took out his mobile phone. How about making a call and asking? As soon as he said this, everyone naturally praised him, but he took out the phone and cursed twice. It seems that the mobile phone has no signal. Where is yours? Needless to say, other people's mobile phones must have no signal. The yin energy here is so strong, let alone calling. I am afraid that even if everyone returns the same way, they may not be able to find their way back. Once Zhuang Tianming's cell phone lost signal, everyone didn't take it seriously at first. Everyone took out their cell phones, but then something happened that made a group of people a little uneasy. There was no signal here. When the cell phone dialed out, it was obviously unable to get through. Chen Chun in the crowd suddenly felt a little depressed. After dialing several times in a row, he couldn't get the call out at all. He gritted his teeth and cursed twice. What the hell is this place? There's not even a signal. At this moment, he said such a damn word that everyone's backs went numb and their thighs tightened. Lily did not take out her mobile phone, but instead walked towards the door away from the crowd. At this point, this group of people would definitely not be able to go back the way they came. She could leave, but this group of people were obviously possessed by a ghost. If it weren't for the people inside, something was deliberately trying to lure them in. I'm afraid they might not even be able to find the main entrance now. She was originally going to meet the female ghost this time, so there was no reason to back down at this time. Now there was only one way to go forward. She reached out and touched the rusty door lock. Shen Chun was not busy at the moment. He stopped talking on the phone, and saw Lily's movements from the corner of his eye, and the anger in his heart suddenly surged up. While dialing someone else's number again, he turned around and yelled at Lily, "Don't move. It's too bad. Can you afford it?" The Song family's family background is not very generous. With the gradual decline of Taoism, the older generation is not smart and does not earn much money, while the younger generation is more financially relaxed. Among the younger generation, Shen Chun is the smartest among them. After graduating from college, he found a job in a foreign trade company in the provincial capital. He worked for 2 years to save some money and invested with several college classmates. After a few small businesses, I still have some savings, so I can be considered young and promising. People in the family are not as clear-cut as young people. They are obviously not related by blood, but even with the name of a senior brother, everyone is helping each other. There are very few people who get angry because of money. Shen Chun doesn't need to think about it. He also knew that if Lily touched the door without knowing what to do, it would be okay if the lock was broken, but if the door was also broken, she would not be able to walk around. Of course, the Song family would have to pay some compensation if they couldn't run away, but if the Song family couldn't come up with it, maybe his grandfather would ask him to help Lily, and it was very likely that he would use the money as a betrothal gift to marry her. Thinking of this, Chen Chun was not willing to let Lily touch the door lock. After shouting angrily, the phone in his hand still made a busy tone. He couldn't help cursing twice and raised the phone again. When he got up and looked back, Lily did not listen to his words and let go. Instead, she stretched out her hand to grab the door lock and pulled hard with only one hand. Everyone heard a clang sound. The lock had decayed over time and was pulled by Lily's spiritual power. Then, the lock fixed on the door panel was pulled out at once. Lily's movements were clean and neat. The door panel was not damaged at all, and the nail holes in the center of the door could still be clearly seen. Shen Chun's words that he wanted to scold her froze on his lips, but Lily looked back at him with a sneer. With a glance and a raise of his hand, he threw the lock in his hand into the hands of the staff member who came in this time. Put it away. After she said this, she reached out and pushed the door. The sutra had been there for a long time. It was not popular here and was nourished by yin qi. Now the wood on the surface was shattered and it felt cold and moist. It felt very disgusting, but Lily seemed not to feel it. She only exerted a slight force on her hand, and with a squeak, the door was pushed open with a trembling sound. A strange smell of mold and damp came out as soon as the door was pushed open. The smell was indescribably weird, like the smell that some flowers, plants, and trees give off after they decay, and the fishy smell of earth and moldy things. The subsequent smells blended together, making people's noses a little uncomfortable. The sound of opening the door seemed like a stone falling into the calm lake, breaking the tranquility of this area. There were a lot of dead grass growing inside. As the door opened, the wind blew in and began to sway, making a rustling sound. Push the front door and come in. It is about 200 to 300 meters square inside. There is a larger door in front. After entering, you have entered the interior of this ancient house. The surrounding walls are covered with green vines, and even the top of your head is covered with green vines. The color of the wall itself could no longer be seen clearly. Everyone seemed to have entered another world by mistake, looking at the world inside, hesitating and not daring to step in. Because it was Lily who broke the lock and pushed the door open just now, even though Lily was still young at this time, she was still regarded as the backbone in everyone's hearts. Zhuang Tianming couldn't help but leaned over. "Little girl, you are too brave. There were snakes outside just now, and there are more terrifying things here if they are not protected. It is better to walk in the middle and be safer, although he also has the skill of the three-legged cat. After all, he is not like most of the people in the field. The people here are just showboats, but after entering this yard, I still feel a little restless. Everyone, follow me on Sina Weibo. I really want the number of fans to exceed the number of my favorites. I believe everyone can do it. The name is WANERWR. In addition, please vote, please vote, please vote. I will dedicate my enthusiasm to everyone. Everyone dedicate your votes to me. To be continued. Carrot. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, WANERWR. Chapter 1194. The yin qi in the yard was so heavy that Zhuang Tianming had a vague premonition that this time it might not be what people from the association said before. He just came in and walked around, and nothing unexpected would happen. Lily glanced at him, his brows were furrowed and there was a bit of worry on his face. I feel something is wrong. His jaw tightened and his eyes were a little anxious. How about we go back the way we came and take a look first? Because Zhuang Tianming had some skills, he already had a premonition that this line of work might not be so good. It went well. He lived a long time, experienced many things, and his sixth sense was much stronger than the average person. As soon as he said this, the other people who came in with him became dissatisfied. Teacher Zhuang, you said it lightly. Do you know how much effort we put into entering this house? The association is said to have invested tens of millions of dollars. When we came in before, the association said that it would take up to 2 days. If it is now go out, and I'm afraid it will be too late to come back in tomorrow, and it will be overtime. What if the association doesn't pay, or asks us to pay for it? That's right, someone echoed, we've come all the way here. If we go back, I'm afraid we'll have to eat a meal. What's more, there's nothing wrong with it under the clear sky and white Sunday. If it's snakes, insects, rats, ants, we also have repellents on hand. Insect potion, daggers, etc. I just encountered a snake, so I panicked because I was caught off guard. The next time I encountered it, I cut off the snake's head with a knife. So far, except for the tiny snake, everyone has not encountered anything dangerous. Many people don't even know Taoism, they just pretend to be gods and ghosts. Naturally, they can't feel the strong yin energy here. At most, I just feel cold instinctively. The association invites people to perform performances every year. The sponsorship received is large, but the rewards given to everyone are also large. If we withdraw now, the association will become angry. What should I do if I refuse to pay any more or get a reduction? Everyone objected in unison, but Zhuang Tianming remained silent. He has a loyal and upright character and has a high reputation among a group of people. But at this time, he was also in trouble. Just when he didn't know what to do, Lily suddenly said, I'm afraid it's too late to go back now. What she meant by too late was that the unclean things in the ancient house might have been gone. It has been rigged so that it is easy for everyone to get in, but it is difficult to get out. But when these words were heard by people who didn't know what they were talking about, they ended up wasting a lot of time. If I go out again, I'm afraid I'll have to go through a lot of trouble again, and my time will be delayed every time I come back. Some people even agreed, saying that if they came back in after leaving, it would be dark. It's so cold in the house during the day, what if it doesn't get even colder at night? There is no light inside, so it is not as convenient as during the day. Listen to this group of people. Lily smiled silently. Shen Chun rubbed his arms and leaned over, rolling his eyes. I just love to be pushy. He was obviously still resenting Lily for not listening to his words and pinching the lock off. At this time, he finished speaking. After saying this, seeing Lily ignore him, Shen Chun became a little angry. He stretched out his elbow and bumped her. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Are you deaf?" Lily looked back at him coldly. Before I could speak, Zhuang Tianming has already spoken. "Everyone, let's see if the phone can get through." Everyone had just touched their mobile phones, but they couldn't get through. They were all speculating whether there was no network coverage in this place. Sometimes the network in remote places is poor and there are no signal towers. It's normal to not be able to make a call. Why don't you hurry up and move forward? Didn't you say that someone will pick you up when you get to the end? It's so cold here. Why does it feel like it's getting colder and colder? The speaker clamped his cotton-padded jacket tightly, teeth chattering against each other, and his expression changed. A little blue and white, with a bit of black energy emerging between his eyebrows. Once someone suggests moving forward quickly, and at this point there is really no reason to give up halfway, everyone will nod one after another and move forward closely. This place already belongs to the house, unlike the outside which belongs to the outer gate, so some bricks and stones are paved on the ground. However, after 100 years, weeds have grown wildly and have long since submerged the stones. The surrounding walls were covered with ivy, as well as the top of the head. Mosquitoes were hiding among the plants and vibrating their wings. From time to time, there were caterpillars in the grass that stung people. Everyone came under the door. This time, the door it was not locked anymore, it was just half covered, and the paint on it had fallen off in large chunks. Zhuang Tianming tentatively stretched out his hand and pushed the door cautiously, but he didn't know whether the door, which looked very heavy, had passed by. The reason that had been hollowed out for so many years was suddenly opened with just a push. Before Zhuang Tianming could even lift his feet to go in, a girl suddenly screamed, "Ah, snake!" A four-legged snake as long as a palm came out from the dilapidated threshold that was as high as his knees, as if it was disturbed by the girl's scream. Frightened by the sound, he stuck out his tongue, climbed up flexibly, and disappeared into the door number above his head with a chirp. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Shen Chun also patted his chest and leaned over with a smile on his face. "Sister, don't you know that people are scary and can scare people to death? My brother is very scared by you, come and touch me. My heart is still beating loudly in my chest, ouch." When he joked, the girl whose face was green and white suddenly turned red with fright, glared at him, and couldn't help but reach out to hit him. Chen Chun without hiding, she yelled ouch ouch twice. The girl couldn't help but burst out laughing. Then Zhuang Tianming frowned. "Stop making trouble." As soon as he said these words, the girl's face was burning, she bit her lip and lowered her head, occasionally raising her head to glare at Shen Chun. The surroundings were very quiet, and only the sounds of Shen Chun and the girl's teasing could be heard. After opening the door outside, the scenery of the garden inside was revealed. Outside is a walkway about 30 meters long. At the other end of the walkway is a curved arch covered with green ivy. Some vine branches hang down, like a natural curtain, half blocking the scenery of the garden inside. It is hidden in it, giving it a sense of mystery. Compared with the overgrown scene outside, this passage looks much neater. The ground here is entirely paved with stones, and the gaps between the stones are filled with pebbles. Perhaps the ground here is not as soft as the ground outside. Because there were no weeds growing here, there was just a layer of black moss growing on it, and the color was a little off. Zhuang Tianming lowered his head and looked down, then reached out to touch it, and the moss actually squirmed slowly. Got up. This scene couldn't help but make people's hair stand on end. When everyone took a closer look, they saw that there was no moss here. They were clearly densely packed with countless tiny caterpillars. After being squeezed into a pile, only the fluff on their backs was visible. Because these bugs are not disturbed by external objects and cannot move when crowded together, at first glance, people think they are moss. If you step on them like this, you may have to step on a foot of insect mud. That scene is disgusting enough to think about. When Zhuang Tianming touched the bug, it began to squirm like crazy, one after another, making people shiver down their backs. Not to mention women's instinctive fear of these things. Even men saw this scene. I couldn't help but feel numb all over. This thing is overwhelming, and there are even on the walls. This kind of caterpillar is only as thick as a toothpick and an inch long. A single one is not terrible, but there are enough of them. This kind of bug should grow in cold and humid places. This place is uninhabited and wilderness. After so many years, no wonder it has grown so much. Just go in. Although these bugs are disgusting, they are not very lethal. As long as you are careful not to let them fall on the exposed skin, there is no serious problem. At most, they will make people feel uncomfortable. Zhuang Tianming asked, and one of the girls was already pale and trembling. As soon as he finished speaking, the insects inside not only did not stop squirming, but moved faster. There was a very thick layer underneath, and I'm afraid it would be broken if you step on it. It doesn't reach the instep. I don't dare to go in, the girl who was still fighting with Shenchun said with a pale face. A middle-aged monk then answered, there are so many things. I don't know how long I have stayed in such a place. It will sting me if you don't know whether the person is poisonous. Why don't you think of a way to shovel it away before leaving? I was afraid of stepping in, and then I would crawl up with my feet. It was really disgusting to think about the scene. Everyone couldn't make up their minds after thinking about it. Lily frowned. Have you brought a lighter? These bugs are troublesome, but they are also easy to deal with. If there is boiling water here, they will all die in a single scalding. As soon as she spoke, someone remembered something and hurriedly took out a lighter from her bag and handed it over. Lily took the lighter in her hand, looked at Shenchun beside her, and suddenly reached out and grabbed the hem of his clothes. Shenchun had not yet before she could speak, she tore off a large piece of Shenchun's Taoist robe with a single force. She clicked the lighter twice and put the rags of the Taoist robe over. Logically speaking, the robe was made of cotton and should be very easy to light. However, she didn't know if the yin energy in this place was too strong. She burned it for a while, but it didn't light up. Lily rubbing her fingers, a stream of spiritual power traveled along her fingertips. She pinched out the samadhi true fire on her fingertips without reciting a spell. Using the lighter as cover, she brought the samadhi true fire close to the Taoist robe. This time there was when the samadhi was a little more intense, the robe instantly caught fire with a boom sound. Lily threw the burning Taoist robe to the ground. The fire contained Tao power. Although the yin qi here was strong, it had no effect on it at all. When she threw it to the ground, she could only hear a squeaking sound. There was a sound. Although those tiny caterpillars were born in moist places, the hair on their backs was easy to burn. A large mass was scorched in one go, and the fire even grew bigger and bigger. I don't like to talk about the problem of piracy, but I usually refresh the Yunkai website every day to read everyone's messages and opinions. What shocked me today is that I found someone in the book review area teaching people how to read the Dao version. This made me I am a little sad. I understand many student parties. I know that everyone is not well off financially and may not necessarily have money. Sometimes it is inevitable that they will be short of money and read for free. But why do you leave such words in the genuine book review area? Two people who say such things, what are the students thinking? To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1195. There was a disgusting smell of burnt meat in the air, which made people nauseous. The pile of caterpillars was burned with a crackling sound, and the caterpillars were rolled into a ball. The strong smell coupled with the sound made people's skin stand upright, and many people began to rub their arms. The fire burned bigger and bigger, the smoke became thicker and thicker, and the caterpillars on the walls in all directions rolled down one after another. Seeing such a scene, Many people felt that even though they had not entered this place, they felt as if their bodies were crawling with such bugs. They involuntarily stamped their feet, as if they wanted to get rid of the feeling. It feels like being crawled with caterpillars. Cough, someone coughed. The smell of the burnt caterpillar was so stinky that many people did not dare to look at the scene in front of them and turned their heads. Shen-chan also covered his nose with a handkerchief and remained silent. The fire was the samadhi true fire released by Lily, so it burned quickly. In about a quarter of an hour, a large part of the ground had been burned. Lily pulled the strap of her backpack and stepped in first. The people behind hesitated for a moment, then Zhuang Tianming followed closely. The smell in the corridor was even more unpleasant. The fishy smell was mixed with the smell of mold and the smell of burnt caterpillars, making people instinctively hold their breath. Everyone had better follow me, Uncle Zhuang, you go last. Lily walked in front. The oncoming yin energy was thicker and seemed to be turning into substance. The spiritual power in her body was turning faster, and the people behind her were many of them looked displeased. Zhuang Tianming was also a little bit overwhelmed, so he gritted his teeth and agreed. Then Lily walked towards the arched door, and he could already see the garden in front of him. After so many years, the garden has long since declined. You can vaguely see the rockery and lotus pond not far away, as well as the arched bridge and the pavilion above. It's just that these are looming in the misty fog and can't be seen clearly. The ground was covered with falling gravel, and the whole garden looked very desolate. Lily walked through the door and stopped, and the people behind her urged, "Why don't you go? Don't be afraid if you want to go to the front. If you are afraid, just let Mr. Zhuang go." The unknown pressure caused this group of people to his temper gradually became a little violent as soon as he said these words. Many people began to get restless. Lily frowned and took out her mobile phone. This was an ordinary mobile phone issued by the association this time. It was definitely not the latest smartphone used for communication, but it had just been fully charged. But at this moment, the phone seemed to have a power outage. The screen went dark and there was no movement. "What time is it?" Lily asked, and someone wearing a watch behind him raised his wrist. Only when he saw it did he realize something was wrong. "My watch is broken." As soon as the speaker finished speaking, everyone came over to take a look. The second hand in the watch was spinning like crazy, and the time was still at 8:30 in the morning. Think about it, it was about 8:15 when everyone entered the garden. It must have been more than 15 minutes to walk such a long way. Zhuang Tianming asked, "What's going on?" "My mobile phone is out of battery." The house had not been occupied for a long time and looked eerie. The people who came in were scared. Lily suddenly stopped. The people behind didn't know the truth, so they were naturally a little panicked. Now she heard that it was just out of battery. They all breathed a sigh of relief. This relief made many people a little annoyed. "I couldn't help but cursed, I stopped for no reason. What's the big deal? I thought something had happened to me. I'm just a timid girl. This is worthy of your surprise. You're afraid of falling behind. No one tells you to pretend to be fat, so go to the front." "Shut up," Lily yelled coldly. The person who just spoke suddenly stood up, pointed at Lily, glared and said, "Do you have the ability to tell me again?" Shen-chan stood in the middle. Seeing this scene, he hesitated and frowned without making a sound. This is a young monk wearing monk's robes. He looks less than 30 years old. He must have been affected by the yin qi here. His temper has become a little violent, his face is a little blue, his lips are purple, and his eyes are full of red bloodshot eyes. Now staring at Lily with wide eyes, as if he wanted to eat someone. Lily suddenly stretched out her hand and grabbed his index finger, pointing at her. The monk was furious and was about to pull his hand back to hit someone, but the girl standing in front of him was obviously thin and weak, not strong, but no matter what he did, no matter how hard he struggled, the finger held by Lily seemed to be clamped by iron pliers, and he couldn't struggle out at all. However, Lily only gently turned his fingers towards him, and the monk's originally fierce expression instantly turned into a look of pain. "Stop pointing at me, I told you to shut up. If you don't shut up, don't blame me for being rude." She didn't look tall and strong, her expression was very calm, and she spoke softly, but at this time, the threat in his words was real. The monk wanted to laugh, but for some reason, he grinned but couldn't smile at all. He could only stare at Lily fiercely, not daring to make any more noise. "What time is it?" Lily let go of his hand, and the monk snorted, shook his hand twice, stepped back, and said nothing. Without the first prize, when everyone heard Lily say this again, they all took out their mobile phones in muttering. Shen Chun leaned over and curled his lips. "What are you doing again?" There was also something wrong with his watch, which was shaking constantly, but he didn't believe in ghosts and gods, so he still looked very relaxed. He just thought that the magnetic field here was wrong and affected the movement of the clock. Lily gave him a cold look, ignored Shen Chun's words, and instead stared at everyone. When everyone saw her like this, they instinctively panicked. Some people took out their mobile phones one after another, only to find that their mobile phones were out of battery. Why is it out of battery? Someone pressed the phone several times first. No matter whether he pressed the reset button or took out the battery and put it back in again, the phone showed no response. When Shen Chun saw the group of people in this situation, he couldn't help but sneered. "Domestic mobile phones are of poor quality." Okay, as he said this, he took out his imported mobile phone. Everyone felt vaguely that something was wrong. After hearing what Shen Chun said, they saw that his tone was a bit contemptuous. Although they were a little unhappy with his attitude, but I still hope that what Shen Chun said is true. It is really just because of the poor quality of domestic mobile phones that everyone's mobile phones are out of battery. Everyone's eyes fell on Shen Chun. With a proud smile on his face, he reached into the Taoist robe that was torn by Lily and took out the mobile phone in his pocket. The relaxed smile on his face soon turned a little serious as he pressed the power button on his phone and there was no response. He pressed it twice more, but the phone still didn't ring. Everyone saw the scene and felt a little gloating. At the same time, I felt a little nervous for no reason. "What kind of good mobile phone did you say?" But it turned out that it couldn't be turned on like us. After hearing this, Chen Chun felt a little embarrassed, raised the phone above his head, and cursed, "What the hell is this? There is no signal in this place, and the mobile phone is out of battery. Is it affected by some magnetic field, which causes? There is a problem here, please be careful," Lily warned Shen Chun before he could finish his words. Shen Chun had just lost such a big person, and now it was an embarrassing time. He was still defending himself when he spoke. But unexpectedly, Lily interrupted him before he finished speaking. He became a little annoyed and couldn't help but raise his voice. "What's the problem? I think you just want to grandstand and cause trouble on purpose. Do you know that if someone reports you like this, you are promoting feudal superstition and they will arrest you and detain you?" Lily had been patient with him for a long time, but when he got to this place, even a fool could see that there was something wrong. He kept chirping. Lily stared at him with a cold and calm look that made Shen Chun's heart tremble. "Your father and grandfather are all doing this, who can you report and arrest?" Shen Chun was about to speak, but Lily didn't give him a chance to speak. "Are you just pretending? There is something wrong here. What's wrong with asking everyone to be careful?" Before, others would just let it go if they were laughing at him, but now Lily actually asked him if he was thinking about grass. Shen Chun's pale face instantly turned red, and he said loudly, "Okay, tell me, there is something here. What is the problem?" "There's something wrong with the watch, the hands are wrong, the phone." Shen Chun sneered twice, interrupting Lily. "Besides these, do you have any new ideas? Are there still those snakes, and those caterpillar? Haha, it's so funny." "Idiot, Lily glanced at him and was too lazy to say anything more to him. Shen-chan couldn't help it and reached out to push her. Lily-song, you can do it, who are you calling stupid? It was 8:15 when everyone came in. Lily turned sideways to avoid his hand. Shen-chan wanted to chase after him relentlessly, while also using his hands and feet. He had always been like this towards Lily-song. He never knew how to show mercy to women, so he used a very strong hand. At this moment, he slapped Lily's arm. Although it didn't hurt her much, it immediately made Lily angry. Chen-chan raised his hand again. When he came over to pat her, she suddenly raised her arm, and then dropped it suddenly. Shen-chan's arm was suddenly caught between her arms. She reached out and grabbed Shen-chan's palm. Before he could react, her body on the side, one of Shen-chan's arms was restrained by her. When Lily moved, he also moved. When he reacted and wanted to struggle, his upper body was also pulled crooked due to Lily's turning movement. He couldn't stand firmly and fell to the ground with a snap. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1196. All the bones in his body seemed to fall apart in an instant, and Shen-chan was so weak that he could hardly get up. He rubbed his lumbar vertebrae when he just fell, and felt a sharp pain at this time, but compared with the pain, the embarrassment was far more difficult for him to bear. In front of so many people, when had Shen-chan ever been humiliated like this? His face turned red, and he almost forgot to even yell for a moment. He instinctively wanted to push up his upper body, but Lily made a fist with her hand and punched him hard to his forehead. The sound of bang made Shen-chan feel dizzy and dizzy. It was as if his forehead was suddenly hit by a heavy object. His eyesight turned black and he couldn't even see Lily's face clearly. He couldn't help but fall down. He fell to the ground, and the back of his head hit the mossy stone slab on the ground. He was like a fish that had lost the strength to struggle. He opened his mouth wide and gasped, and the nausea caused by dizziness came to his mind in waves. Lily knocked him to the ground and then slowly stood up. She had just knocked a tall man to the ground easily. At this moment, everyone looked at her strangely. Lily didn't seem to notice this at all. He looked at her in surprise and stretched out his hands to straighten the broken hair scattered on both sides of his face. It was 8:15 when we entered the house, and when we entered the house, we looked at the mobile phone once, about 8:30. Time when she said this, no one understood what she meant, but Zhuang Tianming quickly understood what was wrong, and his expression suddenly changed. In other words, the time when we entered the house, it won't take more than an hour. Yes, Lily nodded and glanced at everyone who was confused by Monk Zhang It has only been an hour since we entered, that is to say. It will not be later than 10 in the morning. At this time the sun was shining when entering the ancient house. When it was big, but now look above your head, where is the sun? The most important thing is that it is filled with fog. The light seems to be very good. If the time is wrong, it seems to be around 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. How does it look like the morning light? There are no big trees around the house. It was mid-morning at this time, and for no apparent reason, how could it be so dark? Lily's words made everyone's expressions change drastically, and they obviously understood what was wrong. Many people's eyes widened, and their bodies began to swing slightly. Shen-chan, who had just been knocked down by Lily, gritted his teeth and sat up. Come on, grinning. He reached out and rubbed his forehead that was so painful from Lily's slap just now. Hearing her words, he sneered twice. You are pretending to be a ghost. I didn't learn science well when I was a child. Now I only know that I have inherited your father's tricks. There is a scientific explanation for this. No one has lived in this village for hundreds of years, so it is very likely that a miasma will form. What's so strange about breeding many poisonous insects? Yes, you can even boast about it. Okay, please stop arguing. Before Shen-chan finished speaking, Someone shouted in a panic, "Sister Wang, something seems wrong." As the voice sounded, everyone turned their heads to see a middle-aged woman with a pale complexion, green lips, and a dark aura in her hall, as if she had reached her end. Seeing this scene, the crowd suddenly panicked. "What's going on?" This middle-aged woman was the same one who met the little snake before. Everyone fell to the ground in panic and pushing. Then the Taoist nun whose palm was cut by something was particularly impressed by Lily because she had taken off her Taoist robe to give to her. It only took less than half an hour. "I don't know what she did to make her look so ugly." "What's going on?" Zhuang Tianming couldn't help but ask. "Junior Sister Wang, are you suffering from any illness?" The middle-aged woman looked fine before. When she got up after falling, she was still joking with everyone with a calm expression. After just a short time, it seemed that she was no longer able to survive. Now in the ancient house, there is no signal on the mobile phone. Even the power was out, and it would be too late to call an ambulance. Zhuang Tianming was a little anxious. "Anyone, please pick her up quickly and send her out first." A group of people could see that something was not right about this woman. "Son," after listening to Zhuang Tianming's words, a man pulled the woman called Sister Wang against him. Another tall monk lifted his clothes and squatted down. The man holding Sister Wang looked like he was gritting his teeth. Couldn't even speak. When he saw someone squatting on the ground, he let go of his hand. Sister Wang, who was leaning on him just now, fell straight towards the monk squatting on the ground. The monk was caught off guard and did not expect this move at all. He only felt that when Sister Wang fell down, her body was cold and stiff. When she leaned against him, she did not look like a living corpse, but like a dead corpse. The most important thing, she brought a gust of cold wind when she fell down. The monk felt as if a huge mountain fell straight down on his back, weighing more than 1,000 kilograms. Before he could react at all, he only heard a pop with a sound. Sister Wang pressed down on him. His back was hit so hard that he felt numb and heavy. His legs could not support him at all. He subconsciously tried to support his hands on the ground, but for some reason, the weight of Sister Wang on his body increased to several times as many times. His arms shook twice, but in the end he still couldn't stabilize his body, and he lay down together with Sister Wang, who was firmly pressed under him. When Sister Wang fell down, her body was shocked. Her body turned out to be like a model dummy. Her head only heard a gilo sound, and it suddenly separated from her shoulders and rolled to the ground. Everyone originally saw the two people falling and hurriedly tried to help them. But when they saw this scene, they were so frightened that they lost their voices. The group of people were frozen and couldn't react at all. There was a deathly silence in the garden inside the ancient house, and the gentle breeze was still blowing through the garden, bringing with it a rustling sound. The sound that seemed so normal just now was now so eerie and terrifying that it made people tremble. The group's eyes widened, and their bodies were so stiff that they couldn't control themselves. Sister Wang's pale skin was still there, but a large number of soft-bodied insects fell out from the break between her neck and head. The scene was like someone putting bugs into a container, but as the container burst, all the contents poured out. The monk who was crushed to the ground didn't even know what happened. He only felt a coldness all over his head and neck, as if something had fallen on his head and face. He subconsciously stretched out his hand to grab a handful, and said ouch in his mouth. She was hit by something. Before he could finish his words, he tried hard to lift Sister Wang off his body. But something weird happened. Before, Sister Wang's body was heavier than the monk imagined, but now she was as light as a piece of skin. He barely exerted any effort to feel what was originally on his body. Was uncovered. The middle-aged monk had just fallen badly. Now he was lying on the ground unable to get up. His hands and feet were still sore. He just yelled bitterly, "I didn't expect Sister Wang to look not fat, but quite heavy." He only thought of Sister Wang. Someone helped him away, and now he felt pain on his head. The cold feeling was getting more and more intense. The middle-aged monk instinctively reached out to wipe the top of his head, but he felt a cold and soft touch. Those things were he grabbed it, still squirming, and subconsciously held it in his palm. He had a handful of squirming red bugs that looked like small steel clips on women in his palms. His palms were all red, and his head was hurting more and more, as if something was desperately trying to get into his head. When he saw the blood, he was stunned. The middle-aged monk's eyes widened for a moment, but the next moment something even more frightening happened. He turned around and saw from the corner of his eye a person who seemed to be deflated. When he took a closer look at the balloon that came down, he realized that it looked like a head, and the bugs he was holding in his hand were pouring out from the broken part. The middle-aged monk's eyes widened even more. Sister Wang's eyes moved. This situation was particularly weird. When a person's head was separated from the body, her eyes were still shaking. She could still be alive in that kind of situation. It scared people crazy, and then her eyes began to bulge out at a weird angle, and then there was a soft sound of porphyry, and the eyeball suddenly burst open, and a red insect drilled the eyeball in half, and wriggled out of the eye socket. Climbed out. Immediately afterwards, there were many bugs, as if they had found a new passage, crawling out one after another. The holes in their eyes were dripping with black and red blood, and there was a smell. The bugs filled the air, and the bugs squirmed and crawled towards the middle-aged monk. He opened his mouth and suddenly screamed in horror. Ah! This scream completely pierced the quiet air of the house, frightening everyone into excitement. A group of people seemed to have come back to their senses, and screamed desperately. At this time, the middle-aged monk's head was dripping with blood, and many bugs were burrowing from his head. The blood was dripping down his head, dripping all over his face and back. There were still many bugs on his body. He tried his best to it was slapping, looking ferocious and terrifying. Everyone first experienced Sister Wang's accident, and then saw his appearance. They were so frightened that they almost lost their wits. At this time, they backed away like crazy, and some even tried their best to run out. "Help me, save me!" His teeth were chattering, and his face was covered with blood. Many bugs that had not crawled into his body flowed down the blood, dripped onto his clothes, and squirmed towards him. Face crawling. He trembled and went to take off his clothes, shaking his body to shake the bugs in his body to the ground, and raising his legs to step on them. At this time, he was still instinctively thinking about finding someone to save him, but the group saw him. This was such a terrifying scene, but they didn't dare to approach him at all, screaming hysterically. To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1197. Mr. Chuang, save me, save me! The middle-aged monk's voice trembled violently. A big man, but his legs were shaking with fear at this time. Zhuang Tianming was horrified when he saw such a scene. He had never seen it in his life. Having encountered such a strange and bizarre thing, he had a look of worry on his face, but he didn't know what to do. Even Shen Chun, who was fearless just now, was so frightened that he peed his pants when he saw such a situation. He was deeply afraid that if he got up slowly, the bug would crawl on him. Don't mess up, Lily saw someone trying to run. It was strange to say that just now it was clear that everyone came in through the arched round door, but when she looked back, she saw there was another arched round door not far away. They are all rock areas and dry pools, but the ivy next to them is growing better and better. The scenery not far away was hidden in the fog, making it difficult to tell whether everyone had remembered it wrong before and had not experienced any arched round door or burning caterpillars, or whether there had really been one arch, but mysteriously disappeared at this time. Help, there's a ghost. Now, No matter how stupid the group is, they all know that something is wrong. First, there is no signal after they come in, and then their mobile phones suddenly run out of power, and they can no longer communicate with the outside. The most important thing is that after they come in, they encounter such a scary and strange insect has arrived. Now there is no road. It is still morning, but it looks like night in the house. Many people are crying and howling, and there are also middle-aged monks screaming for help. After a while, Lily's voice also sounded, "Don't panic, just stand where you are and don't move." At the critical moment, when everyone was at a loss, Lily's calmness was no longer as offensive as before. The group of people seemed to have found a backbone and moved closer to her involuntarily. The people from the TV station who were carrying cameras and following the filming also moved towards Lily with blue faces. At this time, the middle-aged monk was clearly on his last legs, and he opened his mouth wide. He couldn't even utter a word for help. There seemed to be something surging in his eyes. This scene was exactly the same as the one before Sister Wang's head. What should he do? Zhuang Tianming asked, anxious. Something happened this time. But it's over. Zheng Yu looks like he's in pain, why not? As he spoke, he took out a dagger. This is a pistol issued by the association to everyone for self-defense. At this time, Zhuang Tianming had clearly seen that the monk named Zheng Yu was in trouble. Hearing his weak opening of his mouth, he obviously wanted to help him. To relieve his pain, Lily suddenly reached out and grabbed his wrist. No, she shook her head and pointed to Sister Wang's body that had been cut into two parts on the ground. Did you see that if you were to make a wound on him, he might be like the woman before, with a skin that was if it bursts, the things inside will crawl out, and that kind of bug is a kind of corpse voodoo. Someone once raised this kind of poisonous insect with corpses here, specializing in sucking blood and flesh for its owner's use, and it reproduced very quickly. These goo insects could reproduce in such large numbers in about half an hour and absorb all of Sister Wang. It was obviously a climate change. If you now get into the middle-aged fat monk's body, you can imagine that the speed of reproduction and the lethality will only be more astonishing. If the fat monk is cut open at this time, the poisonous insects will break out of the body. The more flesh and blood they suck, the faster they will grow. One bug is enough trouble. When the time comes, hundreds of bugs will swoop out, and they may not be able to escape if they get on it. Zhuang Tianming turned pale with fright after hearing Lily's words. The man who had hugged Sister Wang just now couldn't help crying. His hands were shaking so badly that everyone around him regarded him as a plague. Stay away from him. At this moment, the body of the middle-aged monk has expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. Apparently, the corpse goo inside has increased. His face has become fat and deformed, his facial features are a little distorted, and his body has begun to, slowly expanding. If it continues at this rate, the skin will burst open in less than half an hour, and the bugs inside will still be scattered everywhere. His eyes were flashing now, and when he saw Sister Wang's two holes on the ground that had been drilled and turned into hollow eyes, Zhuang Tianming shuddered subconsciously and asked, "What should we do?" Now that the road is gone, everyone feels that this house is famous and they don't know where to run. Otherwise, if they encounter something weird again, they don't dare to think deeply about it. And if you don't run away, once the bug gets out, everyone will see what happened to the fat monk just now. This bug will dig in when it sees people. Once it is drilled into the body, there will be no way to survive. Zhuang Tianming was already the backbone of everyone's minds. At this time, even he began to ask what to do. Naturally, everyone became more panicked. Some people couldn't help crying. Lily frowned. It's not difficult. Although these corpse voodoos are very lethal and reproduce extremely quickly, they are not completely invincible. As long as they are kept away from living people and have no flesh and blood to devour, no matter how fast these corpse voodoos grow, they will also die. How fast? And these things like blood. All the corpse voodoos in Sister Wang's body have already penetrated into the fat monk's body. As long as the fat monk and all the corpse voodoos in his body are found together, all the corpse voodoos can be cleaned up at once. Everyone was in a panic, and when they heard Lily's words, they all stared at her as if they had found a life-saving straw. Since there is a way, then do it quickly. Why are you still dazed? The person who spoke was a staff member who came in with the TV station. He was a thin young man. As soon as he spoke, Lily turned to look at him. He panicked, lowered his head, and hurriedly hid inside. The crowd didn't dare to make a sound. By this time, the fat monk's face had already turned blue-gray, and his body had more than doubled in size. His face was swollen like a pig's head, his skin was blue and shiny, and his pupils were bulging, and sometimes even you can clearly see the shape of the insect as it squirms. Lily took out a piece of talisman paper from her backpack and recited a spell. The heaven and earth are infinite, the universe is in order, the fire dragon borrows the magic, go. The talisman paper was mixed with spiritual power, and Lily threw it towards the fat monk. It's strange to say that at first everyone could clearly see that it was just an ordinary piece of yellow talisman paper folded into a triangle. Most of the people present claimed to be Taoists. Many people were familiar with such things. Painting. When many people heard that it was not difficult for Lily to deal with these bugs, they thought she had some good methods. Now when they saw that she just threw a piece of talisman paper out, many people were so angry that their noses were twisted. What's the matter, strange? I can also draw. As soon as the last word draw was spoken, the talisman thrown out by Lily turned into a ball of fire with a boom before it even touched the fat monk's body. It got on the fat monk. The fire appeared out of nowhere. And it burned bigger and bigger, like a spark that started a prairie fire. Soon the whole body of the fat monk was on fire. Because of the blessing of Tao power, the fire burned quickly. Because the body of the fat monk was hollowed out, soon the heads fell down, and many of them were squirming insects as thick as fingers. The fat monk was like a ball of ice cream in the sun, and soon his whole body melted. A large number of corpse goo fell from the broken parts of his body, rolling on the ground with firelight, and was quickly burned. Of coke. There was a disgusting burnt smell in the air, which was far worse than the smell when the caterpillars were burned. A group of people saw this scene. Too frightened to recover, Lily glanced at the fire, turned around and said, "Let's go." 2 people were killed as soon as they came in. Just when Sister Wang's head rolled off, the scene of zombies crawling out scared many people and ran away. As long as they left the large army, it was almost conceivable that these people would not survive. As soon as she spoke, everyone in the courtyard woke up, trembling with fear and turning pale with fear. Shen Chun also looked frightened and moved closer to Lily. The scene he just saw greatly stimulated him. It's just that he has been an atheist since he was a child, so he didn't think about ghosts at this moment. Instead, he looked at Lily several times. "Okay, when did you learn to do this magic trick?" He had just been punched by Lily. "My face still hurts now, if it wasn't for what happened later," and Sister Wang suddenly dropped her head. He might have jumped up and hit Lily already. Lily didn't want to pay attention to him at all. Shen Chun sneered, licked his lips, stretched out his hand to touch his forehead, and followed him anyway. "Miss Song, what was that just now?" Zhuang Tianming also came closer and asked. "The body of the fat monk on the ground has disappeared, leaving only the burnt corpse goo on the ground. The smell is terrible, and the pile is like a hill. The fire on some corpse goo has not been completely extinguished." Zhuang Tianming thought of Lily's calm look when facing this corpse goo. When everyone else was scared, she was still saying that it was not difficult to deal with this thing. In addition, the talisman she threw out was not a trick. It was inevitable that while Zhuang Tianming was shocked, he also became dependent on her. People died in this business, and 2 died at a time. Judging from what Lily just said to wake everyone up, it proved that there must be something weird in this house. The reason why Zhuang Tianming was deeply impressed by Lily was because when people from the Taoist Buddhist Association invited everyone to a meeting, he remembered that Lily once said that the house was very yin-wai, but no one took it to heart at the time. When he thought about it, Zhuang Tianming secretly regretted it, but he also regarded Lily as a life-saving straw and asked questions. Corpse goo, there must have been a corpse breeder here before. Corpse goo is not a common thing. It needs to be found in extremely yin places, looking for people born in the yin year and the yin month, and applying the medicine on the person itself. Treat the human body as nutrients, and use the essence and blood of living people plus resentment and fear as a container. Only in this way will corpse poison breed. It is precisely because this method of raising voodoo is too evil, and corpse voodoo is too harmful and reproduces very quickly, so in the original southern region voodoo technique, the introduction to such voodoo technique was written in red text. At this time, Lily said that there used to be a corpse breeder in this house, and everyone's expressions changed instantly. Once a corpse keeper appears in the house, it proves that there must have been problems in the house before, and it is not as free of danger as the people from the association said. Now the road in front of the house has changed, and the mobile phone cannot connect to the signal. Now there is danger again. Even the corpse breeder has appeared. People died in less than an hour after entering. If you stay here any longer, won't more people die? Thinking of this, some people started to cry softly, feeling hesitant and at a loss. Cheating, Chen Chun's voice rang out from the crowd. His words attracted everyone's attention. Seeing that many people were staring at him, he sneered, anyone who is not corpse goo has already been killed. It's the 21st century, and you still believe that there are some things like this. After he finished speaking, he took out a bottle of mineral water from his backpack, unscrewed the cap of the bottle and filled the bottle with his own gurgling. After drinking all the water, he bravely walked towards the fat monk's burned body. If you ask me, this insect must be one of some kind of mutants. Let's take one back and test it carefully. Then it can be explained using scientific methods. The body of the fat monk was still burning, and many insects were piled up like a hill. Some were burnt, and some were still squirming inside. Everyone was deeply afraid that the insect would come back to life and they would not be able to escape. However, he was not afraid of death and wanted to catch an insect and take it back. What are you doing? Zhuang Tianming was so angry when he saw Shen Chun's move that he stretched out his hand to grab his collar. It was not easy to get rid of all the bugs, but Shen Chun wanted to keep one of them. He himself would die. It's important, but no one here is willing to accompany him to death. Everyone is extremely angry at his behavior. Zhuang Tianming's eyes are red now and his fists are clenched. Shen Chun struggles desperately, facing unknown creatures. There are always dangers. The solution. It's true that the ignorant are fearless. Lily shook her head, remembering that the original owner had been in love with such an idiot for many years. She didn't even bother to look at Shen Chun, and walked directly towards him, reaching out and grabbing his arm. Are there any bugs? Die, push him into the pile of worms, and when he is eaten, I will burn him to pieces, lest this idiot will harm us. Such an above-board method of killing people was discussed, but no one present objected. Everyone hated Shen Chun for causing trouble just now and wanted to disturb some bugs. They hated him to death. After hearing what Lily said, in order to prevent Shen Chun from getting out these bugs and harming a group of people, it would be better to let him be eaten by bugs. Just like what Lily said, when the time comes, reward him with a piece of talisman paper and burn him to pieces. When the time comes, neither God nor ghost will notice. This place will cause the heaven and earth to be incompatible, and the earth will not work. Rather than let him harm others, it's better for him to die. As long as no one tells him, who will know? At first, Zhuang Tianming was still holding Shen Chun, fearing that he would mess up, but now he let go of his hand. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1198. Lily pushed Shenchun toward the worm pile. Shenchun was so frightened that his face changed. His feet were sucked to the ground, and his fingers and toes were curled up and clasped tightly on the ground. At this moment, he did not dare to take the initiative to go to the worm pile again. As he left, he saw what happened to the fat monk and Sister Wang just now. Such a strong man died completely in less than half an hour. He took a bug and went back to do research. He might become famous for discovering this strange creature, but he doesn't want to be eaten by bugs like the fat monk. He resisted and struggled desperately, trying to shake off Lily's hand, but Lily looked thin and weak, but her strength was beyond his expectation. Shenchun struggled several times, but couldn't get rid of it at all. He was pushed by Lily towards the direction of the fat monk. Originally, he was not far away from the fat monk. Now he was pushed a few steps. Shenchun stepped on a burnt insect on the ground. The insect made a cracking sound when it was stepped on. He was so frightened that his face turned green, and he shouted desperately. "Lily-song, are you crazy? Why are you so crazy? Get away from me." The two of them grew up together as childhood sweethearts. Lily-song used to be obedient to him. It could be said that sometimes he lost control and was too heavy-handed when joking. Lily-song never argued with him, but in the past few months, Lily-song seemed to be a different person. Last time, she went crazy just because someone joked and asked when they would get married. She avoided her for several months and didn't come home. Grandpa saw her. She scolded herself. This was not enough, now she actually wanted to push herself to death. How could she be so vicious? Get away! Get away! The feeling of stepping on bugs under his feet made Shenchun collapse. Although he knew that the bugs had been burned to death, he still couldn't help but scream angrily when he stepped on them. Barks, especially the closer you get to the insect. The more scared he gets. After yelling a few words and seeing that Lily was unmoved, Shenchun didn't dare to show off his bad temper anymore. His legs went weak and he hugged Lily's arms with both hands. "You're crazy. If something goes wrong, you can't run away." When he said this, Lily snorted coldly and pushed him closer to the insect pile. At this point, Shenchun didn't dare to be harsh anymore. His expression: "Tai Ching, my parents and my grandfather have been very kind to you since you were young. My grandfather and your grandfather are brothers." When he mentioned this, Lily stopped pushing him. Shenchun breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. The tight heartstrings relaxed, and the feeling of anger and disaster came to his mind. He hugged Lily's arm with almost all his strength, and stood up straight carefully. He picked up his feet and moved away from her at a very fast speed. Then he swallowed his saliva, opened his mouth wide and gasped, as if the 3 souls and 7 souls had just returned to the body, and his heart began to beat desperately. "Why are you so crazy?" Shenchun's eyes were red at this moment, and his body was still shivering instinctively. He had just been so close to the insect, and the scene before the death of the fat monk was still replaying in his mind, and he thought that he had almost changed. Becoming another fat monk, Shenchun collapsed. Lily sneered and licked her lips. First, he lowered his head and straightened out the clothes that were wrinkled by Shenchun. Then he tilted his head and raised his eyes to stare at Shenchun. "Aren't you going to bring the bugs back to study? You are not overestimating your abilities. Instead of waiting for you to harm others, why not let me give you a ride?" At this point, I almost died at her hands. She showed no remorse at all. She was still like this. Shenchun was so angry that he was trembling all over. He pointed at Lily and shouted hysterically, "It's because of your appearance that I won't marry you. Do you think I care?" Lily raised her eyebrows. "But if you say something again and make me unhappy, believe it or not, I will push you in again." Shenchun's face turned green and white, and his teeth clenched. In the end, he still didn't dare to say a word and retreated into the crowd bitterly. After watching such a good show, everyone heard that the relationship between Lily and Shen-chan was a bit strange, but no one dared to say anything. Now when Shen-chan didn't dare to open his mouth, Zhuang Tianming gave Shen-chan an unkind look, asked Lily again. "What should we do now?" Someone whispered. Wu Ming, who came with me, ran into the house. This was a young boy about 20 years old. When he said this, there was a look of anxiety on his face. "He is my cousin." In fact, in addition to most of the elderly people who came on this trip, there was also a small part of young people, whether they were people from the Song family or people from the Taoist Association. In fact, no one took this trip seriously. Judging from the many dangerous experiences, everyone thought about the rules of previous years and regarded this time as a good thing to travel. Some people even brought their own younger generations. When the young people first came in, thinking that one of the founding fathers lived in this ancient house later, they were all excited. Now that something happened, a group of people would be scared. As soon as the young man said this, someone whispered, "Sun Xiao also ran away. And Zhang Yu." Every time he heard a word, Zhuang Tianming's face became more ugly. It wasn't until everyone stopped talking that he said angrily, "Didn't I promise not to run around after coming in? The house is so big, and the location where everyone is now is almost only the front half of the whole house. They haven't even reached the middle of the house. Now that people have run away, the sky looks extremely dark again, and the surroundings are surrounded by thick fog. Fog, where can I find someone? What's more, this ancient house looks eerie. First there was a corpse poison, and then everyone noticed something was wrong. A group of people didn't dare to separate and look for it. After everyone heard Zhuang Tianming's scolding, no one dared to refute. In fact, the death of the fat monk just now was so shocking that these people were panicked and instinctively ran away. After hearing the report, a total of 14 people ran away, including 5 from the Taoist Association and 3 from the Buddhist Association. In addition, the remaining few people were all staff members of the TV station who came in together. Almost all of them were young people, and they were fairly qualified. Some of them ran away without remembering their names. With so many people missing and 2 people dying in front of everyone, Zhuang Tianming felt bad when he thought that he was the leader of the group this time. "Miss Song, what do you think we should do now?" he asked again. This time he got a lot of money, and he also had a lot of responsibility, but now something like this happened, people's lives were at stake. He couldn't bear this responsibility at all, and he looked a little panicked. Lily squinted her eyes and looked at the increasingly dense fog around her. Things inside seemed to have become a climate. She curled her lips and said, "Find a place to rest for a while. I'm afraid it's going to be dark today, so don't run around." "What should I do about my cousin?" the young man who first said that Wu Ming was missing asked in a low voice, with a hint of dissatisfaction in his tone. Lily glanced at him, and he lowered his head for a moment. Then he spoke again, "You all know something is wrong here. Let's find my cousin and others. Otherwise, what if something happens? Every elementary school student knows that you should listen to the team leader when you go out. Your cousin should have thought of this when he ran around. This house is not safe now. Let me tell you clearly that the fog here is not a miasma, but a very strong yin. There is something weird in there. If you move around and separate rashly, who will be responsible if something happens?" After hearing this, the young man became even more anxious. "What should I do? Could it be that my cousin and the others don't care about it? It's not that I don't care, but that I have no way to control it." As soon as Lily said this, the young man suddenly raised his voice. "Why is there no way? Since you can see that there is yin qi here and it is very dangerous, you can't look for it. My cousin and the others. Why are you so selfish? If you normally see such a beautiful girl, young people will definitely try to please people more. But at this moment, with his life at stake, he couldn't care less. As soon as he finished speaking, Lily couldn't help laughing. She glanced at him. "So you blame me?" The young man was speechless by her question. At this time, people whose relatives have disappeared naturally hope that everyone can help find the missing person. But he didn't have any relatives to run away, but he didn't want to wander around in this house. "Let's all look for it together. If we find it, there will be greater strength in numbers," someone said without giving up. This time, without Lily having to speak, someone whispered back, "There is strength in numbers, so we are probably in danger. They will run faster than us." "Stop arguing." Zhuang Tianming was upset by the noise from this group of people and scratched his head. "What should I do now if I listen to Miss Song? As I say, find a place to stop first. A group of us sit together and don't separate." Everyone brought food and water with them when they came in. They would not starve to death in a day or two. "If we go out, the people from the association will definitely find something wrong, and someone will definitely come in to rescue us." Her words sounded reasonable, and the group of people nodded, and everyone agreed. After everyone had gone through what had just happened, they all walked closely together, with Lily and Zhuang Tianming walking at the front. "The fog in the house is getting thicker and thicker. I wonder if it is everyone's misunderstanding. The house that was still desolate before is gradually changing under the moisture of this fog. Water seems to have accumulated in the originally dry pool." A group of people turned around a shabby road. In front of the rockery, you can vaguely see the shadows of pavilions and pavilions in front of you. Shrouded in green mist, it is like a dream, as if you are in a fairy palace. The scene was so strange that one could only hear the rustling footsteps of people walking on the road, and there was no other sound. The group did not dare to express their anger, and the atmosphere was very depressing. Zhuang Tianming also always felt that his eyelids were twitching violently, as if something big was about to happen. The surroundings were so quiet that he could hear his heartbeat. He always felt that the atmosphere around him was strange. He seemed to be able to hear the vibration of his eardrums when he breathed. Sound. Cough. I don't know who coughed in such a weird atmosphere. Everyone walking closely together froze and trembled in fear. This tremor seemed to be contagious, and many people started to tremble. Zhuang Tianming couldn't bear it anymore, and he had nothing to say. Miss Song, what happened to junior sister Wang before? She was so good, how could she be infected with corpse poison? The quiet environment makes people feel frightened. It is better to speak to increase their popularity. In fact, the unknown is what scares people. Many times I scare myself. At this moment, nothing has appeared in the house, and the group has been frightened half to death. Zhuang Tianming was the first to speak, and many people breathed a sigh of relief and stared at Lily, listening to her explanation. Remember, she fell to the ground. Everyone was startled by the unknown little snake before. I don't know who caused the crowd to stir up the crowd first. Everyone pushed me to get rid of them. The group of people was originally wrapped up very tightly. The group of people wore thick shoes, originally to prevent snakes, insects, rats, and ants. Lily guessed that the person who raised the poison must have been buried in the underground area at the door, so there were leftover things there. Ordinary corpse goo dies easily, but in fact, the death of ordinary goo worms, in addition to being nourished by no flesh and blood, more importantly, will be swallowed up by larger goo worms, and finally the goo worms will appear, which are the so-called goo worms. King, once the voodoo seed is cultivated, if the person who raises the voodoo is still alive, the voodoo king can be put into a deep sleep. When Sister Wang was pushed and fell to the ground, with her hands on the ground, she said at that time she was scratched by some debris, and some debris got into the palm of her hand. Afterwards, she washed her palms with water and searched for a long time but couldn't find the so-called fragments that had penetrated into the flesh. I guess it was at that time that a corpse poison got into her body. When everyone heard this, they all shuddered, as if their palms hurt. Anyway, be careful. The yin energy here is very strong, and the poisonous insects are still there. I guess there may be other things. When Lily finished speaking, she could already see the shadow entering the courtyard ahead. From where Lily is, you can see the gate into the yard, and if you look at the aerial photos taken by the association from top to bottom, you can easily see the layout of the house clearly. I didn't even look at the lilies in the rock garden outside. At this point, I'm afraid the group didn't have the time to wander around anymore. Only after crossing the main courtyard gate of this ancient house can they truly enter the ancient house. Lily took out the photo from her bag. The courtyards of this ancient house were connected together, and several courtyards were connected together in the shape of a covered bridge. This courtyard was large and covered an extremely large area. The ancients liked to build houses in a square shape, with corridors wrapping the wing rooms on both sides, and several courtyards passing through screen doors in the middle. There is a plaque hanging on the door, with the words Changchun Pavilion written on it. Even though these three gilded characters have lost color in many places with the passage of time, you can still see a bit of the original house from this plaque. The scenery comes. There are also gray couplets hanging on both sides, but the door is strangely open, and a bluestone slab is paved directly to the door. Compared with the house that was full of weeds when you came in, this place seems to be much cleaner. Brother 11. In silence. Inner OS, I heard that my mother has been having a seizure recently. The author said something that was too delicious and always got swallowed. Readers can't see it. I think everyone knows that I have always been aloof, so they understand my feelings and will vote for me. The result not at all. Lily, so if you want it, just say it. If you want it in your heart, you don't say it with your mouth, and your body is quite honest. How will everyone know that you want it? Brother 11, so I made it. Next, the author appeared and beat me. Who told you not to vote? To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1199. The wide open door looked like a giant beast with its mouth open, coldly watching the group of people enter its mouth. The closer I got, the more I could hear the creak sound coming from the yard, just like the sound of an old-fashioned rocking chair being rocked. It rocked and swayed very rhythmically, making the hairs of the group stand on end. Woke up. Lily stopped suddenly before stepping on the steps to enter the door. When the people behind heard the sound, they felt horrified. Some people behind didn't even dare to raise their heads and asked tremblingly, "Why don't you leave?" "Yes, what is the sound? Is there anyone inside?" Zhuang Tianming also felt his face numb and his legs shaking. Even if he has lived to this age, is not young, and has gained some experience, he will still feel scared when he hears this voice. As soon as he said this, everyone trembled and stared. Despairing and speechless. No one had lived in the ancient house for 100 years. Before they came in, people from the association had sent a plane to inspect it early. In addition, there were weeds all over the ground when the group came in. It didn't look like anyone had come in at all. At this moment, there was such a noise inside. Someone took a deep breath and swallowed. "Why don't you go back? It has reached this point, even if the people from the association promise to give everyone who comes in a large sum of money after this expedition, no matter how much money they have, they still have to spend it." At this time, once someone backed down first, the rest of the people were also moved immediately, and they all shouted, "Let's go back. If something happens now, even if we go back, they won't say anything." The sound of creak, creak, creak kept coming. People were still talking outside, but such a rhythmic sound came from inside, which made people more and more frightened. At this time, it seemed especially tempting for someone to say go back. At that moment, more and more voices agreed to leave. As they spoke, the fog became thicker behind them, and the sky became dark quickly. Looking at the road we just walked, we couldn't see clearly, but the more bizarre the situation became, the more scared everyone became, and they all shouted to leave. In fact, at this point, it was definitely impossible to leave, but everyone was shouting to leave. Even the most stable Zhuang Tianming seemed to agree with leaving, and Lily remained silent. Everyone went back to the original road, and the fog became thicker and thicker. The group of people took out the strong flashlights they carried in their backpacks and illuminated the road. But they didn't know why. This kind of flashlights was obviously specially prepared by people from the association. The range of the shot is 2,000 meters, but under such thick fog. But he couldn't even see the dozens of meters ahead clearly. He could only hear the footsteps of everyone along the way, which seemed to hit everyone's heart. He didn't know how long he had walked. There seemed to be no end in front of him. No matter how stupid you are, you can spot something wrong. In the past, the longest distance from the arched door to the main entrance of the house was less than half an hour. Now I am afraid that everyone has been walking for more than an hour and still did not see the round door. Could it be that we walked on the road? Wrong. Stop, Zhuang Tianming's voice suddenly rang. At the same time, he took out the map from his backpack. It was getting darker now. In such a weird and terrifying place, the darker the sky, the more frightening it is. Everyone heard him shout stop. They all shuddered. Let me see if we are going the wrong way. It was obvious that we had never walked for such a long time before. Everyone also walked the way they came. There was no reason why they would go wrong if they followed this path, but the strange thing now was that they couldn't see the door anyway. As soon as Zhuang Tianming finished speaking, someone suddenly shouted in despair, "Did you encounter a ghost and hit the wall?" As soon as this voice sounded, the faces of the group changed instantly. "Don't talk nonsense," someone shouted sharply, and the woman who said there was a ghost beating the wall said with a bit of a cry, Sister Wang, theirs is gone." Her voice, she was shaking very hard, and because of fear, her tone was a bit sharp, and her voice seemed particularly desolate in this silent house. "I remember here, there is a rockery in front of here, it is here," she said. No one dared to say anything, only to hear the woman's voice. I dropped a bottle of water here, right over there." There was despair in the woman's voice, and the sound echoed with her words. Someone shined the flashlight in the direction of her finger, and sure enough, they saw a mineral water bottle not far away. The mark on the mineral water bottle was already a little gray, as if it had been left there for many years. "Look like." When Sister Wang suddenly lost her head and the fat monk was penetrated by corpse poison, everyone was in panic. The woman was pushed by others and wanted to run away, so the mineral water in her hand was squeezed. On the ground, she didn't dare to pick up the bugs because she saw them later, so the water bottle fell on this place. In fact, everyone had walked past this place twice for more than an hour. The first time she saw it, she thought it was just her. Her eyes were dazzled by fear, or someone else who lost her team passed by and the mineral water fell to the ground. After all, her mineral water bottle should have fallen next to the fat monk's body. There should be a lot of corpse poison here. But when the woman saw this place, although there were mineral water bottles, she did not find the bodies of the fat monk and Sister Wang, nor did she find a pile of corpses. She just thought she had remembered it wrong. But she still kept it in mind, so when she passed by for the first time, she firmly remembered the direction of where the mineral water bottle fell, as well as the location of the trademark, and she also remembered the surrounding environment. When it reappeared for the second time, she was almost sure that she had remembered it correctly. It was clear that everyone had not gone back, but they had come to this place again. With fear in her heart, she asked her suspicions, and everyone suddenly, it was like a pot was exploding, and they shouted, "No way, if you think about it carefully, maybe someone else's mineral water dropped." The woman just cried in despair, unable to speak at all. At this time, there was a rustling sound, the surrounding fog became thicker, and the sky was almost dark. Someone bravely pointed the flashlight over, and saw the shadow of an arched door not far away appearing in front of everyone, covered with crawlers. The red bugs, large and small, as thick as a finger, were clearly the same as the corpse-goo before, squirming desperately. In the night, the body of the corpse-goo looked bright red, like an extremely gorgeous wall. Seeing this scene, the person holding the flashlight screamed and threw the flashlight on the ground like crazy. "Turn around and run." Zhuang Tianming was also frightened out of his mind, but he still remembered Lily's instructions that people were not allowed to run around in this place, so he suppressed the fear in his heart. He grabbed the man and shouted, "What are you going to do?" "Insects, insects, there are so many." This man could not speak fluently, his lips were trembling, and his legs were so weak that he could not stand. The way back was blocked, and there was no other way but to go back. Everyone had no choice but to walk back to the main courtyard of the ancient house along the way back. This time, many people in the team began to cry softly, "I want to go back. I want to go back. I don't want this money anymore. I don't want this money anymore." Many people cried softly after hearing this. But at this time, how can they help others? When they wanted to exit before, everyone couldn't find their way out. I walked back and forth twice in the heavy fog and couldn't find my way back. But this time when I wanted to go back to the main courtyard of the ancient house, I didn't take any detours. After walking for about 10 minutes, the words Changchun Pavilion appeared. Then he appeared in front of everyone again. The sound of creaking in the yard was still there, and Lily was walking in front. Maybe it was because it was getting dark, but a green light appeared in the yard. If they were in other places, the group would be tired and scared, and they would be excited to see some light. But all the fools in this ancient house knew something was wrong. Now that there is a quarrel, it is not a good thing. What's supposed to come will always come, you can't even hide. The people behind didn't dare to cry too loudly, as if they were afraid of disturbing something. Lily turned her head and glanced at the person behind her, who was about to go up the steps first. Chen Chun behind her suddenly stood up. "Be timid, what is there to be afraid of? There are no ghosts in this world, it's all a lie." After saying that, he walked towards the ancient house with his head held high and his chest held high. Holding the flashlight, Lily saw that he was going to swollen his face to make him look fat. She sneered and followed slowly. Everyone was walking behind. Shen Chun was still sneering with one corner of his mouth curled up at first, but he had just stepped into the tall building. Entering the courtyard through the threshold, the sarcastic smile on his face quickly turned into fear, and his eyes were so round that they almost fell out of their sockets. The flashlight in his hand fell to the ground with a clang and rolled twice. He didn't know where it landed. Only a faint light could be seen. "What's wrong?" the person behind asked, and Shen Chun suddenly made an uncontrollable sharp scream. Lily stepped forward. There were corpse-like things hanging on the left and right sides of the door. The corpse had been hollowed out, leaving only a piece of human skin. It was unknown what was inside, and it was emitting bright light. Human skin stretched into a human skin lantern. The creeping sound just now came from the iron hook hanging on the top of the human skin lantern. One end of the iron hook was hooked on the man's head, and the other end was hanging high above his head. When the wind blew, the lantern kept shaking. The iron hook rubbed against the beam, making a weird sound like an old-fashioned rocking chair. "Ah!" The people who came in from behind screamed one after another when they saw this scene. 2 lanterns made of human bodies were hung at the door of the old and dark ancient house. The facial features of the human skin lantern were all covered in the green light shone clearly, and even the acne marks and hairs on the face could still be seen. Some people screamed, This is Wu Ming." The person who said before that his cousin had disappeared was now frightened. "You have to piss yourself off." Although the human skin lantern had become swollen, the young man still recognized his cousin. His voice was trembling, and there was despair in his tone. Everyone could no longer bear it, and they were so frightened that they could only he used his best to yell and cry to vent his emotions. "Stop arguing," Lily frowned and shouted sharply. No one could hear her words at this moment. The crunching sound was still ringing from the top, and the two bodies had already been hollowed out. The corpse inside glowed with a strange green light and stared coldly at the crowd below. "I can't stand it anymore, I want to go back, I want to go back," someone was holding his head and crying loudly, as if going crazy. Shen Chun was also frightened at this time. He didn't believe in ghosts and gods before. Now Leng Hui was scared when he saw these two strange corpses, but he didn't really believe what ghosts and gods were doing it. Instead, he said loudly, "I guess there must be some terrorists here. We should call out for rescue." His words seemed to bring some advice to everyone. Some people's eyes lit up and they hurriedly touched their mobile phones in their pockets. However, no matter how hard they pressed the on/off button, the mobile phones did not work at all. Many people cried while desperately pressing their mobile phones. Some people saw that their mobile phones were useless, and finally smashed their mobile phones on the ground angrily and cried loudly. The sky had completely darkened, and a cold wind blew. Everyone huddled together. A young man holding a camera on the TV station sniffed, "What should we do now?" "Ah," he still said before he finished speaking. He suddenly seemed to have seen the most terrifying thing in the world, and screamed in an unusually shrill voice. Then his throat felt as if someone had pinched him tightly, and he could no longer scream. Everyone was attracted by his voice, and then they saw the person from the TV station with his eyes wide open, bloodshot eyes, and a look of extreme fear. Following his gaze, his eyes fell on the camera. He was responsible for carrying the camera. This time, the people from the TV station had already turned on the camera when they entered the ancient house and did not turn it off all the way. The people from the TV station requested that the video be recorded from beginning to end so that it could be edited later. Cut, the camera is wide open at this time, and everyone can see the picture on the palm-sized screen. Now follow the gaze of the man carrying the camera on the TV station. The camera lens is reversed at this time. He probably just carried it in a panic. Holding it backwards, everyone can clearly see the panic and helpless expressions of a group of people from here. More importantly, in the crowd, two faces are unusually clear. Sister Wang and the fat monk who died before, now smiling strangely, he blended in with the crowd. Precisely because the death of Sister Wang and the fat monk just now was so strange, everyone was very impressed with them. At this time, seeing the two people who had obviously died in front of them, Leng Huishe suddenly appeared in front of everyone. A group of people almost went crazy with fright. Everyone lost their voice. Under the extreme fear, they could not even stand firmly. They seemed to have lost all strength and could not lift their heads. Please vote. The monthly ticket these days is even less than the moral integrity I carry on my body. Please give me your tickets so that I can save some moral integrity. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 1200. The two people on the screen were leaning side by side, looking at the person standing in front of them and sneering. Suddenly the fat monk wiped his head, and a lot of red corpse goo crawled out of his head, and blood flowed down. Sister Wang, his head also started to fall. "Help me, save me, it hurts." The fat monk's cry for help when he was swallowed by the corpse poison rang out. Many people did not have the courage to open their eyes and look. Their legs were shaking like fallen leaves in the autumn wind. At this moment, the corners of the fat monk's mouth said something strange. Just as the sneer became more terrifying, Lily's calm voice suddenly rang out, "Life and death are determined by fate, gods return to temples, ghosts return to graves, and monsters return to mountains and forests. Why are you following us? Save me, save us, save me. When the fat monk heard Lily say this, his expression suddenly became ferocious, and he stretched out his hand to grab the crowd. The person standing at the end was so scared that his liver and gallbladder split. The man's face turned blue in extreme fright, and he stood stiff on the spot, unable to even dodge. Before the fat monk's hand touched the man's shoulder, he said, "The heaven and earth are infinite, the universe is orderly, and yin and yang are in order. Break it for me." As Lily chanted a spell, a piece of talisman was held in her hand. Before the sound of the spell could be heard, the talisman was thrown out. The fat monk and Sister Wang, who had cold smiles in the camera before, were still grinning, but their laughter was a bit sharp. "Save me, save me." The ghostly cry was heard in human ears. The soul is a little unstable. Apparently it was because the ancient house had too much yin energy, and Sister Wang and the fat monk died tragically, so it became a climate in such a short period of time. The talisman turned into a fire dragon and rushed out before the fat monk's hand touched the man. Seeing that the fire dragon suddenly opened its mouth wide, and a large number of corpse goo with sparks in it crawled out of the mouth in an endless stream, he let out a sharp scream, and his hands moved as fast as if he had been electrocuted. He shrank back again. The stench of the corpse being burnt by fire came again. Under the light of the fire, he and Sister Wang quickly transformed into bodies covered with corpse poison, screaming miserably, their faces covered with blood. His expression gradually turned bitter. "You will come to accompany us, you will come to accompany us, those who can't run away, those who can't run away." The fire dragon hit the two ghosts, and the two ghosts let out sharp screams. They glanced at Lily bitterly, and suddenly a blazing fire appeared on their bodies, just like when Lily's talisman burned them. The bodies of the two people turned into a large number of corpse goo with flaming light. They crawled to the ground with a rustling sound, and quickly disappeared into the ground without any shadow. The fire dragon roared in the air and turned twice. Lily made a move with her hand, and again. Chow Lily circled back and turned into a line of black ashes. Slowly fell onto the palm of Lily's hand. Seeing this scene, everyone's throats went dry, large beads of sweat formed on their foreheads, their legs shook like chaff, and their faces turned pale. Lily snorted coldly, threw the black ash in her hand to the ground, and clapped her hands. When the sound of her clapping came, a group of people who seemed to be in a nightmare woke up. "Just now," someone said in a dry voice, but he didn't even have the courage to talk about the scene just now, as if he was afraid that he would just mention the names of Fat Monk and Sister Wang again. Those two ghosts will appear again. Because those two ghosts disappeared too quickly. No one was sure whether they were dazzled or not. I met a ghost fighting against the wall before. No wonder I didn't see the bodies of those two people. It turned out that they got into the team. Lily patted her hands clean with a calm expression, and took out the mineral water in her bag to take a sip. When everyone heard what she said, goosebumps came out all over their bodies again. Thinking that everyone was walking around outside before, and that the long-dead Sister Wang and the fat monk were also among the crowd without being discovered, the big guy just felt as if someone had stuffed a handful of sand into his throat, which was dry. Uncomfortable. Fortunately, someone brought a camera and the existence of two resentful ghosts was discovered invisibly. Otherwise, everyone who followed them along the way would still not know what was going on. It would be scary to death just thinking about it. Everyone was breathing heavily. The water torch that Shenshun had dropped on the ground when he came in was still rolling around. Strangely enough, the layout in the center of the yard was very strange, about 2 meters away from the gate. It is an extremely long pit, about 1.5 meters deep, with a rockery in the middle. In the night, the shadow of the rockery, already covered with moss, looks like a demon with its fangs and claws snarling under the shadow cast by the faint light. This should have been a pool before. Although I don't know why such a pool was built in the main courtyard of this house, after 100 years, there is no water in the pool. There is some moisture underneath, which should have accumulated after rain. Just rain. The flashlight fell down and was still rolling around. As the flashlight rolled, the light became brighter and darker. When it rolled, the light hit the wall of the pool and refracted shadows. A shadow stretched out from the ground. Everyone was frightened by the sound, but they didn't know if something would suddenly appear underneath. No one dared to suggest picking up the flashlight. Anyway, there were many flashlights. I don't know if it was because it was already dark in the house, but the wind noise around him began to get louder and louder, and the human skin lantern hanging above his head began to sway more and more violently, and the creep sound became more rapid, and only the outer layer of skin was left on the body, which was so light and fluttering that it couldn't help but sway in the wind. Its hands and feet were swaying with the wind, which looked particularly terrifying. Lily had just stuffed the finished mineral water into her bag and carried it on her back. As the flashlight fell into the pool, she saw something was wrong with the shadow above her head from the corner of her eye. She turned around quickly, just in time to see the person who had been raped before. The human skin lantern that the young man called Wu Ming had an extremely ferocious expression at this time. His eyebrows seemed to be coming to life, his face was green, and a pair of hands that were blown up by the wind were about to touch the person standing beside him. Next to him was the young man who was still crying for his cousin. Lily didn't care about taking out the talisman paper at this time, and said loudly without thinking, "5 thunder curse." The sound of thunder sounded, and a purple lightning bolt cut through the dense yin qi here. Amidst the thunder, everyone turned their heads subconsciously to look, and happened to see the human skin lantern that seemed to come alive to pick it up. Looking like a young man. The young man turned his head after realizing it. Seeing this scene, his heart was broken. In extreme fright, he took several steps back to avoid the hand of the human skin. He just avoided it, but did not think about what happened next. He knocked away many people in the pool and pit. Lily saw that he had retreated to the edge of the pool and was about to fall in the next moment. When she was about to remind him, it was already too late. The young man stepped into the air and waved his arms in the air several times. Suddenly a look of fear appeared on his face. He stepped on the air with his back foot and fell straight backwards. At this moment, the 5 thunder curse cast by Lily had already hit the person called Wu Ming. There was only a loud bang sound. The corners of Wu Ming's mouth were still pursed tightly, but there was a sound in his body. There was a piercing scream, and the next moment thunder bombarded the corpse. Thunder and lightning were originally the nemesis of evil spirits. At this time, when it was bombarded, there was only a bang sound, and the Wu Ming seemed to it was like a balloon stuck by a needle. It exploded all of a sudden, and pieces of skin and flesh exploded everywhere. Before Shen Chun could react, he only felt a coldness on his face, as if something bounced into his face. The thing felt cold and slightly hard, like the pig skin sold in the vegetable market. When he realized what it was, Chen Chun felt overwhelmed and a sense of nausea came over him. He was almost frightened. He tore off the thing that had just been stained on his face in a hurry. In his desperation, he didn't notice that his fingernails had scratched his face. He didn't even feel the pain. He just instinctively threw the thing to the ground, as if he was wiping away the touch of the thing on his face. A group of people reacted similarly to him, but as soon as Wu Ming's human skin burst open, with a boom, the large green light inside dispersed and scattered. Now a group of people began to howl like ghosts, and everyone he was beating like crazy, remembering the scene when the fat monk died. Everyone was deeply afraid that these nameless insects had got into their bodies. Many people screamed and cried, and the scene was like a pot of porridge. Lily snorted coldly. Simply did not stop, released another thunder curse in his hand, and ran straight towards another human skin lantern. The human skin lantern seemed to instinctively want to hide, but in such a situation, if someone drilled through the top of its head and caught it with a hook, how could it escape? Amidst the thunder, the human skin lantern also burst open, and a large number of green things inside rushed toward everyone like green clouds. The previous corpse goo had already cast a deep shadow on people's hearts. Now a group of people were screaming as if the end was coming. Lily was upset by the noise. "Are you okay?" "It's just a firefly," her words made everyone stunned for a moment. Many people were slapping and beating like crazy and crying and making noises. Now they calmed down and saw the fireflies flying in mid-air. It was indeed a group of fireflies. They had scattered and fled. Some were knocked to the ground by people going crazy, and some had been trampled to death. "Ugh, I want to go back, I can't stand it anymore." A girl finally couldn't bear the torment and started crying like crazy. Before she could finish the last word Ellie, she suddenly withered. A sudden change occurred in the pool. The young man who originally fell into the pool saw his cousin Wu Ming and another human skin lantern being destroyed by Lily. He thought the crisis was over, but because of the shock just now, his legs and feet were still weak. "Can't lift it up." Rolling all over the floor, twisting, rubbing, asking for votes. "Every day because of the tickets, I couldn't eat anymore. I only ate 2 bowls at noon, and my hair was almost bald. No one was so compassionate that they threw all the tickets in front of me with a righteous hand. Express your loyal love to me." To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1201. The pool was full of mud, moistened and soaked by rain. When a flashlight fell, the moss on the surface could withstand it. However, the weight of the man was much heavier than the flashlight. Most of his body was already embedded in the mud. He looked miserable, his hands were soft, disgusting to the touch, and mixed with a fishy stench. When he was trembling and trying to sit up, a dark, dry hand stretched out from the mud, and the young man felt something cold behind his back. Something pressed against him, and he shuddered unconsciously. The hand then slipped silently into the young man's chest, and easily pierced through his body with a puff. Before the young man could even react, his chest was pierced. The man scratched a hole, and blood spurted out, splattering all over his face. His eyes widened, and his body was still turning instinctively to see. Suddenly, a beast-like roar came from the pool, and a mummy-like thing covered in mud sat up, half hugging the young man in his arms, and suddenly stretched out his hand to hold his head. "Wow woo." It opened its mouth. Its face was covered with mud. Its eye sockets were already rotten. It was full of mud. When it opened its mouth wide, its teeth were pitch black and sharp. It bit into the young man's neck. Everyone could only hear the flesh being torn apart. The sound was simply terrifying. Perhaps because it happened so suddenly, people at the edge of the pool forgot to escape for a moment, and only watched helplessly as the young man was bitten on the neck. Only half of his neck was left. Connected to the head, the bitten flesh and blood vessels were still bleeding out, and the residue at the fracture was still there, and the young man's head suddenly tilted to his shoulders. It was obvious that he was not breathing for a moment. The dark and skinny thing threw the young man to the ground, and jumped up with unusual flexibility, and rushed towards Lily and the others fiercely. The young man's blood flowed down the pool, and the crowd was faced with such a change. They were already frightened and helpless. Many people were so horrified that they still remembered that Zhuang Tianming and Lily had said before that they should stop running around. The people from the TV station didn't even want cameras. After losing it, he ran away. Zhuang Tianming felt bitter in his heart. He really had 2 skills. Compared with the many people who sneaked in just for fun this time, he learned from a master since he was a child. Supernatural events, I've seen it before. He's not too courageous, and his skills aren't bad either. That's why the Taoist Association and the Buddhist Association sent him as the leader this time. But even though he had lived for so many years, what happened today was still beyond his expectation. Seeing this dark thing jumping towards the side, Zhuang Tianming instinctively retreated. He had studied Taoism for decades, but now he found that things were coming and he couldn't recite a single spell. He could only retreat. Until his calf reached the high threshold, he could no longer retreat. His body suddenly sat down on the threshold. The threshold hurt his buttocks, but he couldn't feel it at all. His whole body was as cold as if he had been soaked in water. In the cold water, white hair broke out in cold sweat on his back, his hands were shaking, and even as he instinctively held his breath, a voice of a quick mantra rang in his ears. "Get out of here," his eardrums were buzzing. Originally I couldn't even hear my own heartbeat. But for some reason, when Lily calmly shouted these few words, it shot out of the clouds like an arrow and penetrated sharply into his heart. His heart skipped a beat. His eyes quickly became clear, and the next moment he saw Lily's fingerprints. A piece of talisman paper was pasted on the head of the black shadow. When he got closer, Zhuang Tianming saw that it was a black mummy. The whole body was full of the smell of rotting corpses. The teeth were blackened and the lips were so shriveled that they were rotten. You can clearly see the gums inside it, its eyes are filled with mud, and there are only 2 holes left in its nose. Its arms are dry and fleshless, but its 10 fingernails are extremely long, and the lily talisman paper is attached to its shoulders. It made a sharp scream, a large amount of corpse energy came out, and the place where its shoulder touched the talisman made a sizzling sound. Obviously, this thing was in great pain. Black energy surged from its body. The next moment, the talisman shook twice and turned green into black ash. In an instant, the kung fu ignited and fell to the ground. As the talisman fell to the ground, the thing grinned, and the next moment Lily snorted coldly, "Huh." She threw out 2 talisman again, and this time the talisman, one on the left and one on the right, happened to be attached to the shoulders of the mummy. The mummy let out a painful scream, and a large amount of corpse gas spurted out of its mouth as it screamed. Many people's faces turned green after taking a sip, and they were not feeling well. Seeing this scene, Zhuang Tianming instinctively kicked his feet to step back. His arms were as soft as noodles and he couldn't use any strength. Even if he knew that he was blocked by the threshold, he also knew that if this mummy was really, if he had to chase him, he might not be able to escape, but at this moment he couldn't care about that much at all. His back was dripping with cold sweat, and the corpse's corpse energy was rolling even more fiercely. The 2 talismans lasted for a few more seconds this time, and automatically ignited again, turning into ashes and falling to the ground. The mummy seemed to be angered, and he picked up a young girl next to him and bit her in the face. The poor young girl didn't react at all. When she was caught, she didn't even scream. She was bitten on the face. When she was thrown away again, her originally beautiful and delicate face seemed to be, it looked like it had been bitten by some ferocious beast. The nose and the upper half of the lips were gone, and there was only a bloody puddle on the face. The mummy grabbed the girl's body and dragged it into the pool. There was only a bang sound, and the girl he was thrown onto the surface of the pool and disappeared. Under her own attack, the mummy still showed ferocity and killed 2 people in a row. Lily's face darkened, and she stepped forward. When the mummy's hand moved towards Zhuang Tianming, she put her hand on the dark arm of the mummy. Shen Chun, who was holding the door frame not far away and was in a dilemma, saw this scene. His heart almost jumped into his throat. He didn't know whether to sneer or dodge. For an atheist, everything he saw today was beyond his imagination. Several things that happened here can no longer be explained by science, including the sudden appearance of Sister Wang and the fat monk, and the coldness of the mummy. After being resurrected, he saw Lily stepping forward without knowing her own abilities. Logically speaking, the 2 were childhood sweethearts who grew up together, so he should have stepped forward to help her. However, he could not protect himself at this time, and Lily was seeking death. When someone encountered the situation, it was too late to hide, but she wanted to move forward. Shen Chun turned his head, took a deep breath, and was about to leave. But the next second, his eyes widened and he saw Lily reaching out to grab him. This mummy, with a strong force, actually dragged this mummy to the ground. Everyone saw the strength of the mummy just now. With one claw, it pierced the chest of the young man who fell into the mud. The force was extremely strong. He had thrown a woman into the pit with a casual throw. But such a monster was easily knocked to the ground by Lily. When the heavy object hit the ground with a bang, Chen Chun almost couldn't believe his eyes, but soon he saw Lily laying the mummy on the ground. He fell to the ground and stepped on it. One of its arms was still held in Lily's hand. The corpse energy that was originally very lethal to others did not have a particularly great impact on Lily. The mummy still wanted to jump up, and Lily was dead. He stepped on it, grabbed its arm and pulled it hard. There was a sound of porphyry, followed by a sound like a stick being broken. Lily pulled the arm of the mummy off. Just throw it aside. The mummy lost an arm and its balance was greatly reduced. Lily held its head again with both hands and twisted it hard. With a click sound, the head was picked off like a pumpkin. Lily grabbed it with one hand. Holding the mummy's hair, he quickly took out 2 talismans from the bag and put them on the mummy's dark head. There was a bang sound. This time, the talisman was not easily destroyed again. Instead, it was the mummy's head this time. When the talisman was stuck on it again, the head suddenly exploded, and the black soup inside burst out all over the floor. The struggling headless body was also pasted with the talisman as usual by Lily, and soon the corpse exploded, and a large amount of black fishy ichor gushed out and flowed all over the ground. The previously fierce and unusual monster soon became silent. The remaining people who did not run away and saw the scene survived. Their legs were shaking like a sieve, they could not speak at all, and they opened their mouths to gasp for breath. Lily took a few breaths, and several people on the side looked a little strange. These people had just inhaled a large amount of corpse gas. At this time, their eyes were red, and green bloodlines like earthworms crawled out on their faces. Their hands were already uncontrollably, he looked like a chicken claw and made a sound of hoo-ho from his mouth. Lily took out 2 talisman papers, grabbed a person casually, and stuffed one of the yellow talisman papers folded into a triangle into his mouth. A scream came out of his mouth, and the next moment the talisman turned into thunder. The man's head suddenly split into pieces, and he slowly fell to the ground. He no longer looked like he did just now. Then several other people who had something wrong were also dealt with by Lily in accordance with the law. When Shen Chun saw the scene not far away, his face turned pale. The smell of blood all around was so strong that it made people feel sick. Minced meat, blood clots, hair, and black pus from the previously mummified corpses dripped all over the ground. The remaining people were breathing heavily, and Shen Chun looked like he pointed at Lily like crazy and yelled, You killed someone." He saw with his own eyes that Lily took the talisman and stuffed it into these people's mouths, and their heads exploded. Shen Chun lived in a peaceful era. When had he ever seen such a bloody scene? At this time, I was so stimulated that I couldn't even speak fluently. My moral integrity was off the charts today because I was so happy to be praised by people who praised my writing. Tell me I'm beautiful, vote for me. To be continued.